present and also drive people out of the city. Critics also point to how other cities, particularly Houston, who've had to dig themselves out of much larger budget holes than the city of Austin is currently facing at $33.4 million. They've been able to do that by sort of tightening their belts, having efficiency studies and cutting costs that way, not going the route of the property tax increases. The groups here say that the work doesn't end tonight if they are successful tonight, because the budget hole does not go away and the city will have to figure out a different way to address that. So they're pushing right now for a transparent study, a financial forensic audit to really take a look at the city finances, take a look at everything to find a way to move forward. They're calling this, as I said, a turning point day for the city in terms of the coalition they brought together in terms of everything that they've been able to accomplish over the last couple of weeks as they've really put out this message to try to get people to vote against Prop Q. Ashley?
Yeah, Daniel, really some people seeing this as a referendum on the city council itself and the spending that the city council does. One of the most interesting points that some of the opposition have made is that this would just be the beginning. And next year, when it's time for property taxes to increase, they would likely increase again. So they saw that as a starting point. That's something that really motivated people to get out. Yet and still, there is a group of people who are supportive of Prop Q who say without this, they will not have the essential services that the city needs. KVUE's Malia Masamoto is live at a watch party with people who are for the prop. I know they're seeing those early numbers. They can't be happy about it, Malia, but are folks still hopeful over there?
Ashley, absolutely. They are still feeling optimistic, even though those early votes are coming in. Obviously, they want to wait to see what Travis County voters are saying. Obviously, I talked to some people who said they were also out at the polls today and saw those long lines like you mentioned. So they're going to be waiting to see really when those results all come in. But they are still feeling optimistic, even though it's early. And there are some council members here. I spoke with Councilmember Ryan Alter. He is here in support of Prop Q. So there are a lot of people here in favor of this. The energy is growing here. And Austin leaders do say that the tax increase would generate about $110 million in tax revenue. The largest portion of that would be going towards programs to reduce homelessness and add affordable housing. That's $35.5 million of that 110. Money would also be going toward improving public safety and parks and recreation programs. I did also speak with a member of a union for city and county workers who said if Prop Q doesn't pass, that will mean some big cuts to essential services. Here's what he had to say.
If Prop Q fails, it means severe cuts for essential things that keep Austin livable. Things like making sure our fire, EMS response times are low. When you call 911 and seconds count, that's when we need that, we need that to be fully staffed.
Obviously, I heard also people saying cautiously optimistic too. I know it's early. I know there's a lot of people that care both sides of this issue, so they are really just waiting for those official numbers to come in and see how they feel about all of that. So we're going to be watching here and chatting with some more people as the night goes on. But for now, reporting in North Austin, Malia Masamoto, KVUE News.
All right, Malia, thank you. So, of course, those are the big local races. But in terms of the state of Texas, all Texas voters get to weigh in on 17 proposed amendments to the Texas Constitution. So we want to run you through those 17 props and talk about exactly how things are shaping up. So we'll start with Prop 1. This is a proposition that would fund Texas State Technical College. It would give them some money. Lawmakers have long said that this technical college, which prepares students for fields other than your traditional university fields, they haven't had a lot of set funding from the state. And so without that funding, it's hard for them to know how to grow and come up with a plan for the college to expand. They have campuses, though, all over the state of Texas. And you can see right now, they're getting a lot of support, with nearly 70% of voters saying, yes, they want to see some money go to Texas State Technical College. Proposition 2 is certainly an interesting proposition. There are two like this that deal with taxes. So Proposition 2 would ban the Texas legislature, would put it in the Constitution that the Texas legislature may not put a tax on capital gains. So a capital gains tax would be a tax on a profit from selling an asset, such as a stock. Right now, Texas does not tax capital gains. This is not a current tax, but what they're saying is that it would never be a tax. And so there is some opposition to this because there are people who feel like we should not be tying the legislature's hands. We don't know what will happen in the future, and they may need this as a tool in the toolbox. But you can see right now, 68% of voters are supporting that proposition. Prop 3 is certainly one of the more controversial propositions that we've seen in the state of Texas. And this is one that would allow judges to deny bail for 9 crimes. These are considered extremely violent crimes: murder, aggravated assault that results in a serious bodily injury, continuous human trafficking of persons. While judges right now have the ability to deny bail in some cases, there are lawmakers who say it does not go far enough. And instead, what we see time and time again, what we have seen in Texas, is someone commits a crime, they get out on bond, and they go out and commit another crime, perhaps another murder. And so this would all aim to stop that from happening. You can see that we've got about 64% of Texans supporting that as of right now. Overwhelming support in Williamson County, or I shouldn't say overwhelming support, but strong support in Williamson County at nearly 58%. Over in Hayes County on this one, you can see it is split as well. So this is one of those propositions that the Democratic Party in Travis County was opposing. You saw a lot of Democratic groups come out opposing this, and you can kind of see those numbers reflected there. Moving on to Prop 4. This is a proposition that has widespread bipartisan support. This would create the Texas Water Fund. And essentially what would happen here is every year, after the state of Texas collects $46.5 billion in sales tax revenue, the next $1 billion would be put into the Texas Water Fund. And that fund would pay for water projects, not only to fix leaking pipes, old infrastructure, but also to find new sources of water across the state of Texas. It would be $1 billion a year for 20 years, this getting overwhelming support from the state at 70%. If we go to Prop 5, this is an animal feed tax exemption. So right now, the farmers and ranchers do not have to pay taxes on animal feed when they purchase the feed. It doesn't cost to produce the feed, but stores do have to pay taxes when they are storing, when they have that feed in their stock rooms before it's sold. So this aims to level the playing field, lawmakers say, and make animal feed a tax-free product. The hope is that those savings would be passed down to farmers and ranchers who could use a break, especially right now in this economy, in terms of what's happening with food prices. And so you can see that it is getting some support. If we look at some of what our local folks are feeling, 60-40 split in Williamson County. They're over in Hayes County, 62-37%. If we go over to Bastrop County, bit stronger support for it there at 69.1% to 30%. So you can see that this is getting some support. Comal County people there, obviously strong supporters of that. Moving on to Prop 6. This is, as I mentioned there were 2 propositions related to taxes. This would ban the legislature from putting a tax on securities. And what I mean by securities is that's financial transactions. And this proposition, along with the proposition on capital gains, really important as Texas tries to attract the Y'all Street or Texas Stock Exchange, or they call it several names. It would be up in Dallas. And what's particularly interesting, you can see there's more support for it than against, but in Dallas, where Y'all Street would be located, right? Early voting totals, 42% of precincts reporting. And you can see that folk over there are opposed. Again, we want to note there's currently not a tax on securities in the state of Texas. The legislature is not proposing such a tax, but folks, again, some want to see this as a tool that lawmakers could have in their toolbox in times of uncertainty, economic uncertainty, to be able to put a tax on those financial transactions. Proposition 7 is really a tailored proposition. So it's a tax exemption for the surviving spouses of veterans who have died. So right now in the state of Texas, disabled veterans, if you are 100% disabled, you do not have to pay property taxes on your property in the state of Texas. That is an exemption that the state offers veterans. And when that veteran dies, that tax exemption passes on to their spouse. However, there's a specialized group of veterans. These are the veterans who dealt with burn pits, Agent Orange, some of those things, those very specific circumstances that have now been seen by the federal government as being that they have gotten conditions related to their service because they were in service and came into exposure of all of those things. And so they were not listed as 100% disabled, which means they were not eligible for that tax exemption. The federal government is doing its part to offer benefits to those families and those spouses. And so the state of Texas wants to extend that tax exemption to the surviving spouses of those veterans who died, again, related to burn pits, related to Agent Orange. And you can see that there is strong support for this proposition across the state. Prop 8 it would prohibit the state of Texas from putting death taxes. So basically taxing the property, the estates of someone after they die and that land is passed on, that property is passed on to their families or any sort of gifts. Again, this is not currently taxed in Texas, and this would prohibit that from happening. And again, you can see pretty widespread support at 74.5% in support of this, with 39% of the precincts reporting. Prop 9 would really impact business owners all across the state of Texas. So this would be a tax exemption for personal property that is used for business. So think cell phones, think computers, things in your office, things of that nature. Right now, Texas gives business owners a tax exemption of just $2,500 for all of those personal things that they use in order to conduct their business. This would increase that tax exemption for business owners to $125,000. And you can see that it has pretty good support right now. That 38% reporting, got 67.2% of Texans supporting that compared to nearly 33% against it. If you want to zoom into our local area, we can see in Williamson County, it's a 57-42 split. Hayes County, 55-48 split. So very interesting to see the numbers coming out there. Prop 10 is also a very specific property exemption. So this specifically would offer a property tax exemption for homes that are damaged because of fire. As you all know, your properties are appraised. Those appraisals come out in January. If your home were to burn down in February, there is no way to reconcile that bill. The appraisal is still as if a house was on it and not as if it was completely destroyed in February, which is what happened. This proposition would create a way for folks who have, and it's very specific, the home has to be destroyed by fire. If the home is destroyed by fire, this would create a process where you can get a new appraisal on your property and also have a prorated amount, so that yes, you would pay for what was there in January, a house on your property. Obviously, if something awful happened and there was no house and it was destroyed, again, specifically by fire, this would allow you to get an exemption, because the thought is, why should you have to pay property taxes on a house that is no longer standing? And again, you can see widespread support from across the state of Texas, with 90% of people supporting this, what many call common sense legislation. Prop 11 is one that I know a lot of people can get behind. So this is a proposition that would increase the property tax exemption for Texans who are ages 65 and older, as well as the disabled. So you all will remember during the last legislative session, not the one that just ended, but the one before that, and we had another election, we increased the property, the homestead exemption to $100,000. And now we're talking about increasing it again. But for the elderly and the disabled, the property tax exemption did not increase. They get an additional exemption on top of that. It's $10,000. This would increase it to $60,000. And again, you can see widespread support. This will put a lot of people in a position, if it passes, to not have to pay any school property taxes. And the schools, there's a hold harmless clause in this. So the state would put in more money to make up the difference that those school districts would be losing. So it's not going to hurt schools, but it is going to help the elderly and the disabled. Proposition 12 is certainly an interesting proposition to watch. And I wish we had numbers in from Travis County, because I would really love to see how Austin voters are weighing in on this. This proposition would change the State Commission on Judicial Conduct. So the State Commission on Judicial Conduct is who you write a complaint to. If you, let's say you have a complaint against a judge, or you have a concern about a judge, you would write to that commission. It is made up of 13 people. They're appointed, many by the bar, some by the governor, and some by the Supreme Court of Texas. Under this, one of the significant changes that would be made is that the State Bar of Texas would no longer get to appoint any members to the commission, and rather the governor of Texas would get to appoint 7 of the 13 members of the commission. So he would appoint 7 of the 13. The Texas Supreme Court would appoint the other members of the commission. There was concern among some that this would make the courts too political, that the governor would have too much influence. But you can see that it has strong support among Texans. Nearly 64% of Texans right now, with 38% of precincts reporting, support this, compared to just 36%. If we zoom in locally, it's still passing, right? Williamson County, 53-46. And if we go down to Hayes County, a little bit tighter, well, not much tighter, actually, 53-46 there too. And that's with 60% reporting. So wide support for that as well. Prop 13 is the big proposition that, again, it and 11 have big implications. This would increase the homestead exemption for Texas homeowners, folks, all across the state of Texas, from $100,000 to $140,000. So if this proposition passes and Prop 11 passes, which would increase the exemption to $60,000, an additional $60,000 for the elderly and disabled. That means the elderly and disabled would have a $200,000 property tax exemption, which means many of them would not be paying property taxes. That's your school taxes. That's what the state can control at all. And again, just like Prop 11, under Prop 13, this does not cost schools. There is a hold harmless provision, which means the state of Texas will put in more money, more of those tax dollars to the schools, so that schools aren't losing money when the property tax exemption is increased. Prop 14 is another proposition that has widespread support. This would establish the Dementia Prevention and Research Institute. So similar to CPRIT, which is Texas's Cancer Research and Prevention Institute, DPRIT would be dealing with dementia. And right now the numbers are really astonishing. Texas has the 3rd largest population of folks with dementia in the country, and the number of seniors in Texas is supposed to significantly increase by the year 2030. And so this is a project, $3 billion over 10 years. And basically what they would be doing is giving research grants out. Largely how CPRIT works is how DPRIT works, in order to do more research into dementia prevention and figure out how we can increase the quality of life for Texans. Proposition 15, we're getting to the last 3 propositions here, and these are particularly interesting because the last 3 are what some see as pretty controversial. In fact, the Travis County Democratic Party was against all 3 of these. But so Prop 15 deals with parental rights. And what this would do is this would take largely all of the judicial decisions that have been made about parents and their rights to raise their children and how they raise their children, which is largely decided in the court system. It would take the rulings of all that and put it into the Constitution. Supporters say to clearly define what parents are allowed to do, the role they have in raising their children, the rights that they have. You may be saying, okay, well, Ashley, why would there be opposition to this? There is some concern among some legal minds that say this could have a negative impact on things like what's taught in public schools, and if a child is a victim of abuse, what types of interventions can happen because of the parental rights. There are others, legal minds, who would say that that is not in fact the case, and you can see there is widespread support of this. If we look on our counties, about a 60-40 split in Williamson County, again about a 60-40 split in Hayes County, where you can see people are pretty supportive of that proposition. Prop 16 would put in the state constitution that you have to be a U.S. citizen in order to vote. You're saying, Ashley, you already have to be a U.S. citizen to vote. And I would say, yes, you are right. In the state of Texas, you have to be registered to vote, and in order to be registered, you have to be a U.S. citizen. But the state constitution does not explicitly state that someone has to be a U.S. citizen in order to vote. And so this would put that into the Texas Constitution, that only U.S. citizens are allowed to vote. You can see it's getting widespread support. Some see it as unnecessary. They say this is already the case. Why do we need to put this in? But you can certainly see that it's getting support. And again, if we look locally, strong support in Williamson County, strong support in Hayes County for that as well. Prop 17 is, you all of a sudden see all of this red. Now it's still passing right now. 44% of precincts reporting. It's about a 60-40 split. This proposition would exempt improvements that are made on border community properties relative to the border wall construction. As you all likely know, the state of Texas is in the process of building its own border wall. And because of that, some property owners who have donated or agreed to allow their land to be used for that border wall construction, their property appraisals are then increased because of things that are added, whether it's roads that are added, whether it's the actual wall. And so this would allow the state to give them a property tax exemption for the improvements. The appraisal of the land remains the same, but the improvements that were added, they would get tax exemptions. And I think one of the things that's really telling and interesting is when you start to look on the border and you see that there is, opposition to this, let's say in Starr County, there's opposition to this in Cameron County, there's opposition to this in Webb County. But again, overall, did not mean to hit the zoom there. We want to go back out to the totals. It's not quite working. Even if we look in Williamson County, right, 52-47, so a closer split here. It's certainly interesting to see how people are feeling about that. And then when we think about congressional races, we have CD 18 on here. Now, this is not in our area. This is down in Houston. You all will recall former Houston mayor, former state representative Sylvester Turner was elected to Congress in last November. He lost his battle with cancer. He died in March. And for 8 months, the people in this district in Houston have had no representation in Congress because we've not had a special election yet to fill his seat. There are, get this, 16 candidates running in this race to replace Sylvester Turner. There's a lot of people running. And so it certainly looks like this is going to head to a runoff because it is unlikely that any of these candidates will get 50% of the vote. We're at 51% reporting, and you can see Christian Menifee is in the lead at 32.4%. Former Houston City Councilwoman Amanda Edwards in second place, and then Houston area State Representative Jolanda Jones coming in third. So looking at this point like we could be headed to a runoff with our top two candidates. That runoff is expected to happen early part of next year. All right, let's talk about some other local races on the ballot. When we talk about the Pflugerville mayoral race, right now there is no incumbent running in that election, and it looks like Doug Weiss is in the lead. Now, we do want to note we don't have early voting numbers from Travis County yet, so this could certainly change as the night goes on. Going down further south to Kyle, there's also no incumbent in that race. Robert Rizzo is in the lead, though, at 43%. Yvonne Flores-Calais at 34%, trailing behind him. Let's talk about some school bonds. Taylor ISD Prop A is $147 million in bonds for facilities and buses. You can see that largely folks down there are in support of this at 64%, 36% against. If we go on to Prop B, this is a property tax rate increase in Taylor ISD, and again, 58% in support of that proposition. Moving along to Liberty Hill ISD Prop A, there is a tax rate increase here in Liberty Hill at 56% for, 44% against. Again, these are, while the property tax rate would be increasing, there would not be increases to folks' tax bills because of savings that the school district has acquired. Moving on to Hayes CISD, they want to increase the property tax rate there, and you can see a strong number of folk against it, 60% against this, 40% for it, but again, still very early in the night in terms of the totals that are coming in. And again, we want to give you another look at Prop Q. You can see still sitting at 69% to 31% for, so largely folk against this, but these are early voting totals only, and this is only Williamson and Hayes County. Travis County has not yet released its voting totals. They say they want to wait until the polls close before they do that. We all know that the polls technically closed at 7 p.m., but if you were in line at 7 p.m., you do get to cast your ballot in the state of Texas, and so that is why we are seeing a late rollout of the numbers from Travis County. But we'll be back here with another update for you shortly as soon as we get more numbers in.